Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. Today we're finally going to cover the performance on the GTX 780 to see if it's still a viable option here for 1080 and 1440p gaming in 2016. If you've been following along recently on the channel, you saw that I went to my friend Sam's house to get back my old PC, which was housing an i5-3570K with 16 gigs of RAM and two MSI GTX 780s. Since I've gotten it back home, I've now transitioned it into the Inwin 805, threw in a CPU liquid cooler in the form of the Enermax LickTech 240. So this build is all together now, and I'm ready to give it back to my friend Sam, but we had to do some testing for it here on the channel. And I wanted to pit the 780 against the 970 because I did feel that it was a fairly even matchup, and you can actually get those 780s for about $100 cheaper as it sits right now here in early 2016, with the 970 retailing for around $300 to $330, and you can find 780s used on eBay for around $200 to $225, which could be a really good steal. So I wanted to see how good that still is here for 1080p and 1440 gaming, or if you're out there, already running on a 780, which could be a very good possibility, and you're thinking about upgrading, you want to know if it's worth upgrading at this point, or maybe you should wait for Pascal. So that's what I wanted to show here today. And if you're worried about the SLI performance, I'm going to show those numbers in a separate video where I'm going to focus on cooling as sort of a follow-up to the recent video I did focusing on gaming at 0 degrees, and we're going to test SLI cooling with aftermarket versus reference cards and see which one works out better in my testing. So that's going to be a really fun video. Be sure that you're subscribed for that. But if you want to get a sneak peek at the 780 SLI numbers, I'm actually going to put a push link down in the description below if you just want to see a screenshot of all the test numbers that I've got here today on an easy spreadsheet so you can follow along. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into those rockin' benchmarks as we always like to do, so we can get a look at the data and then discuss it afterwards and come back and we'll conclude and talk about all the numbers. So let's do it and kick off into those rockin' benchmarks. Yeah! Rockin'! Alright, so we got to look at the numbers there, and I actually thought that was a really impressive showing for the GTX 780, even though it was losing to the 970 in pretty much all of the benchmarks. I still think it showed that it was a really strong card. And, you could pick one up for around $100 less than a 970, like I said. So you're going to have to factor that in, especially based on the games that you play, and see if it's actually going to matter for you, because I could tell you, in some games, it was more of a contributing factor than others, being that the 970 does have 4 gigabytes of video memory, and the 780 does have 3 gigabytes of video memory. The games where I saw this most really making an impact, I would say it was Rise of the Tomb Raider and probably Rainbow Six Siege, when we were starting to step it up to like 1440p, but it was still actually hanging in there pretty well. At least on Rainbow Six Siege. But when it came to Rise of the Tomb Raider, it really did struggle with 1440p. It was just running out of video memory flat out. It was caning it at 3 gigabytes. In some other games, I was hitting that 3 gigabyte limit, but it wasn't as much of an issue, like Shadow of Mordor. Didn't have any issues with it there. Didn't have any issues in Fallout 4. Even though I was running those games on 1440, it didn't seem to be as much of a limiting factor. Even though the video memory was capping out, I didn't see any hitching or anything like that. In Rise of the Tomb Raider, though, and also I would say GTA 5, I was seeing some of that, but GTA 5's also could be contributed to the CPU factor. Being that that is an open world title, it would benefit more from an i7. We've seen that in some testing in the past where i7s do benefit on games like that and Witcher 3 to have an i7. So just having an i5 3570K in here is likely a significant bottleneck, and that's evident also by the fact of how close the numbers were on those titles when switching between the resolution. There really wasn't as big of a gap as we saw in the other titles, so that would be indicative to me of a CPU bottleneck. Another interesting set of benchmarks worth noting here were the Unigine benchmarks, Valley and Heaven, where the 780 actually beat out the 970, which I thought was really interesting. So I actually spoke to Brian over at Tech Yes City, and he chalked that up to coming down to the compression between Maxwell and Kepler and how they handle it differently on those particular benchmarks. So that could be a definite possibility worth looking at. If any of you guys are, more knowledgeable about that subject, and, let us know down in the comments below. I would love to learn more about that kind of stuff, because I'll be honest, there are limitations to my knowledge when it comes to hardware, and I'm okay with admitting that. That's fine. It's okay to admit your limitations. I'm just happy to learn more. But I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. I hope you did enjoy the benchmarks here for the 780 against the 970. As I mentioned, if you're curious about those 780 SLI numbers, I'm going to have a screenshot link down below so you can see all those SLI numbers. And when we do the final video where I talk about cooling on SLI with aftermarket versus reference cards, I'll probably throw those numbers in there as well. Maybe if I could figure out a way to have that actually make sense in that video that's focusing on cooling. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, and I will catch you guys next time. Tara. Why do I always laugh at the end? Why do I always have to get, every time I'm at the end, to do the Tara, and then it's like a, like, what was the joke, Joker? What was the joke? What was the inside joke going on in your brain that you had to have that little titter right at the end? What's the inside joke, huh? People at home, they're wondering. They want to know what was the point of the titter. Why the titter? I said tit. That's why I laughed.